Hello, everybody. I just shaved my beard today, and I think it's a good day to tell you something I've learned today, which is kind of interesting. It's about the concept of self and the self perception among different cultures. So, basically, in the philosophy, there are no three ways how we perceive the concept of self, which is the basic of our identity or our self uh, perception, how we perceive ourselves and the relation to human, to himself or herself. So the atomistic model is the most familiar and I think was most prevalent in the Western Judeo-Christian cultural tradition, and it's that there is certain essence or soul which is defining each individual. So it's very rooted in the individualistic concept of the human, which we have in Western culture, in like the Judeo, which is coming from the Judeo-Christian religions. I I really think this had certain evolutionary benefit because it's placing the individual in kind of story. So the individual is like the myth. He can be the hero. So it's definitely giving the self certain meaning, which in other perspectives we might not experience. So in this atomistic view, there is the essence, the soul of the individual. Many traditions like Christianity and they even believe this soul is like immortal, and after death you will re-emerge in certain life after death, where you still can enjoy your memories and this essence and maintain it, which is kind of rare if I will compare it now with different Eastern traditions, which don't rely and cling that much on the individual. They are more collective. So the another perspective is more like relational perception of self. It's very much based on the chaos theory and on the fact that in certain complex structures the meaning of the parts is given by the structure and how the structure interacts and how each of the parts interact with a different part. So in this case, what we see is that the individual is it's defined, the self is defined within the relational terms with objects, subjects, different individuals. So, in other words, to say that we don't exist if we are without that environment we are emerged into. So that's what's defining us. Without that environment, without that group of friends, without that society, we wouldn't be ourselves. And the third one is the perception that self is only a illusion, and there is a constant flux of all the variables which are changing, and therefore there cannot be anything such as self, and self is just as an optic illusion, which is perceived by our imperfect cognitive apparatus, and therefore it has not that big meaning as we put it. So it's perceived as the quality of certain attributes which our somatic uh, functions are giving us. Therefore, we have certain body which is composed of certain physical matters, different materials. Then we have some perception apparatus as our senses. Then we have our thoughts, which is our brain, and all that factors are just certain attributes which are working on their own and making illusion of this compact self, which is otherwise not even existing. we can see it as just a perfect illusion, because we perceive ourselves as the same individual. For example, now when I'm 25, that when I was, I don't know, 12, but still I changed a lot. So maybe that's just the illusion, and all that flux just moved around so much that it's a completely different person. Like our cells are changing constantly and everything. So the question is, what would even be like the essence is not considered as possible in this view. And yeah, now I will go to the Eastern traditions. I already explained more the atomistic, which is typical for the Western individualistic worldview. In the Eastern worldview, it's varying a little bit. We go from the India, which is more like mix between the Judeo-Christian worldview and the Eastern one, which are more like collective oriented. So the India would be the mix. And in the Indian thought, there is this concept of the Atman and Brahman. Atman is like the supreme self, which is like something beyond our memories and beyond our perception, but it still defines certain essence of something of our, which is transferring to another life, and which is passing our karma, which is not really necessarily karma understood as the karma clinging on some traits of identity, like memories and definitions, which we associate with the self in the atomistic Judeo-Christian worldview. So the Atman is more something beyond all that, which we think as the ego self. It's like the supreme self. And then you have the Brahman. Brahman is like the rest, the all the universe, all the creation, everything around, everything surrounding us, which is not the Atman. So the relation between Atman and Brahman is direct, and the goal of the Atman is to realize that the separation or the self is only the illusion, and through the moksha, kind of, which is the enlightenment in the Hindu sense, cease and merge into existence with the Brahman. In this condition, we are speaking about the enlightenment without the self, because in the moment of the moksha, the Atman is disappearing, it's forming the Brahman again, and the Brahman is the whole. So there is no dualistic perception between the I and it, so it's just the oneness. This is the result of the goal of life, according to the Hindu tradition. Then in Buddhism there was a subtle change, and their concept of anatta can, to the Western, it can sound similar than the concept of Atman, but it's called anatta, which is meaning without the Atman, because they say that, as I mentioned before, the self is only illusion. So the Buddhists don't see the universal self as something, existence. They completely reject this kind of essence thinking, and they think, as I mentioned before, that all the self is just this bundle of the attributes which are kind of creating this illusion of ourself, and the goal for them is to reach the nirvana, which would be like the realization of the awareness, and kind of merging with it, with the pure consciousness, which is like the oneness, but through the observation of each part, and the noticing that all these attributes are not something as separate self, but but they are just forming something. They are like attributes which are forming the illusion of the self, which is just perceived by us, and it's kind of a trick. Uh, it's very interesting to see how even these Eastern cultures perceive and deviate the concept of incarnation, which in the original sense would be incarnation in a perspective of non-personal self, and many people understand it as the incarnation. It's still maintaining their memories or maintaining some parts of their identity. So many people from this culture see it as the life after death for the Christians, Jews, or Muslims, but it's not every tradition. So there is like very little consistency in this aspect, because normally based on the primal doctrines of these traditions, the goal should be not these incarnations, but the ultimate enlightenment, which would be like the non-self enlightenment, and the self is just the entrapment in kind of ego world, ego perception. It's also very interesting how in China and Chinese philosophy, where the focus on the individual is much lesser even than in India, and they are much more collectivistic and much more focused on the life well lived. So all their philosophy is about living a selfless life with the virtues. So it's not about what is after death. It's not about asking the ultimate question, but it is, as we see in Taoism, to be the perfect human. That is like the adaptation of their perception of the Buddhist concepts of the nirvana in the Chinese Buddhism. It's that you are the Buddha when you reach nirvana. You are the enlightened, but it's not about you dying to the enlightenment, but it's about you living a life which is selfless, which is transcending your ego self. So you live and serve all these people, and that virtuous existence is in the Chinese philosophical perspectives seen as the Buddhahood, or like the supreme goal of the existence and the supreme meaning or purpose of the self. It's also curious what I have learned, that for them the Confucianism, which we see as a philosophical tradition very significant in China, the Chinese term is not even referring to Confucius, who was like the founder of this school, because for them the individual is not at all that important. So we can see some little Marxist sprinkle the top of Chinese thought, which I think in relation to the current situation and how China is working is beautiful to see how it's still kind of, we can still perceive the collectivistic nature of this nation. And yeah, like it's very interesting how they really put emphasis on the collective, not on the individual, in complete contrast with the West, which is, I think, the pure example would be United States with their pure individualistic liberalism. Yeah, so I just wanted to share this. I hope you found it interesting and it served and you liked it same as I liked it, and have a good time.